Good morning, everyone. You're very, very welcome to this, the third quarterly survey on the conditions for North-South and East-West cooperation, the presentation of the results. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Anthony Suarez. I'm the director of the Centre for Cross-Border Studies, and I'm very pleased to be joined once again by Ben Rocha, who will actually be presenting and some of the analysis of the results from this third quarterly survey. Ben is a PhD candidate at Queen's University Belfast and also a research associate with the Centre for Cross-Border Studies, which we are very, very happy to say. I'm going to just share a presentation with you, so just bear with me as I share my screen. Hopefully you will be all able to see that. I would just like to begin really by reminding you of why we are doing this quarterly survey. That this is the third one. We began obviously in March of this year, and it's a vital means really for us to really get an understanding of the extent to which the really necessary conditions for North-South cooperation are being maintained, which is part of the protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland, specifically Article 11 of that protocol. And also how relations between civic society organisations and local authorities on the island of Ireland and Great Britain are being safeguarded. So this is about North-South and East-West cooperation and relations. So looking at the status, that the health of those means for cooperation and relations following the end of the Brexit transition period and the beginning of the implementation of the protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland. It's specifically aimed at civic society organisations and local authorities for a reason. And it's in light of the fact that when there was a mapping exercise of North-South cooperation undertaken in 2017 by the UK and the European Commission, some areas or some activity in terms of North-South cooperation might have been overlooked. And that was actually pointed to in the technical notes that accompanied that mapping exercise. So the technical note issued by the UK government and the equivalent technical note issued by the European Commission, where they admitted that further areas of informal, local and community level cooperation may not have been captured by this exercise. So we're really concerned that we don't lose sight of those areas of cooperation, which are vital areas of cooperation, vital areas of activity in terms of North-South and East-West cooperation that sometimes might become invisible if we're looking at just more formal areas of cooperation. So that's one of the reasons why we really were keen to undertake this quarterly survey. I would like to express my gratitude, or our gratitude, but also to ask a favour. Why not? First of all, we really are enormously grateful to all those who've responded to this survey, and especially to all of those who responded in previous quarters. It's really important that we have these repeat respondents, this core group of people who are responding on a regular basis to our quarterly surveys. So I really wanted to thank those people who, on behalf of their organisations, on behalf of their local authorities, have responded to this survey and previous surveys. We're really, really grateful to you, and what you're doing is extremely important. We do need your ongoing help in responding to future surveys, because that's the means that we can then raise issues that are important to you. And I'll speak a little bit about that in a moment, but it's so important that we continue to get those responses from you so that we can monitor what's going on the North-South and East-West front. This is a marathon, it is not a sprint. I really understand that, especially at smaller community organisations, might be exhausted by all of this Brexit and the protocol and its implications, the ongoing political activity around Brexit and the protocol. It really is exhausting. And I do get a sense in talking to representatives of some community organisations that there's a feeling now that the conversation really around Brexit and the protocol is amongst, let's just call, well, I'll include myself in this, Brexit geeks, and that we're the ones that are just following this on a constant basis, that it's almost become an industry of itself, that's only concerned, it's only Brexit geeks speaking to each other. That is not the way it should be, and we really hope that that it doesn't turn out like that. It's important that all of us are involved in these conversations, that all of us are inputting into what's going on, and that people don't feel that they're excluded from these conversations. So I really want to stress how important it is for people to input their views by responding to these quarterly surveys. Your voice is heard, and what you say is used. It is used by us as we work with other organisations, as we seek to protect North-South and East-West relations and cooperation, not least through the ad hoc group for North-South and East-West cooperation, which the Centre actually convenes. And this is where we can really see where the information that's provided, the views that are provided through this quarterly survey, the insights, the little gems that come through in this survey, they are communicated to decision makers, to the top decision makers in the European Commission, UK government, Irish government, all those who are involved in shaping this post-Brexit context, and how the protocol is implemented, and how we can ensure that North-South and East-West cooperation and relations are maintained, that the conditions are maintained. So I'm going to hand over now to Ben, who's going to take you through the analysis of the results. And Ben, just whenever you want, you just give me the nod, and I will go on to the next slide. So over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Anthony, and good morning, everybody. Hello again to those of you who have joined us before, and welcome to everyone joining us for the first time. I'm Ben Rosher, as Anthony says, a PhD researcher at Queen's University Belfast and Research Associate for the Centre for Cross-Border Studies. And today I'm going to be giving a general overview of the results for our third quarterly survey on the conditions for North-South and East-West cooperation. Fuller analysis is going to be available in the research briefing, which will be launched after this presentation at midday, I believe. Now, in terms of this presentation, to begin with, I'm just going to give an explanation of the data, how it can be used, and any caveats and limitations we have to bear in mind for ours and any subsequent analysis. I'll then give a breakdown of the respondents to this survey before heading into the substantive parts of the analysis, namely the experiences and perceptions of cross-border contact, cooperation and collaboration in both the North-South and East-West dimensions. Just next slide, please. Now, in this round of the survey, 85% of respondents have completed at least one round or one previous round of the survey. And this means that while differences in the composition of the panel mean that it's not possible to make direct comparisons between this and the second survey, because some people have completed the first and third survey and others have completed the second and third, what we can do at this point, because of this repeat, because of the number of repeat respondents, is start to infer the shape of some trends over the course of the year in a practical sense. And this is what Anthony says, it's really, really good and helpful for people to keep coming back and responding. And well, you know, we appreciate it takes something, appreciate it takes commitment. This does mean that we can paint a picture of the experiences and perceptions of cooperation and collaboration in the context moving forward. It really does help to inform policy in the longer run. Now, following on from the positive response to our second survey, we've continued to include open text responses on how respondents are experiencing the changing political, social, regulatory and material conditions for North-South and East-West collaboration. And this information has proved invaluable in painting a more nuanced and detailed picture of the current context for cross-border collaboration. It also bears emphasising that the respondents to all rounds of the survey conducted each have a wealth of insight, experience and expertise of cross-border cooperation and collaboration. And so the results presented need to be considered with that in mind, that we are drawing on the insights of experts and of people with very, very intimate relations of cross-border relations. For this survey in particular, it's also worth noting that this was conducted before Lord Frost's Lisbon speech and the new EU proposals on the protocol. And so while these things will not likely convert into any material changes for some time, we would anticipate that they will have an impact on perceptions, and that will be captured in the next round of the survey. The data has been collected via a survey of self-selected respondents between the 17th and 30th of September this year, and gathering 61 responses in total. As I've said, 85% of these, so 52 respondents, have reported that they completed the survey in the last quarter, while 15% are new respondents. Of the 61 responses to the survey, 38% were based in the Republic of Ireland and 53% based in Northern Ireland, with 10% having a presence on both sides of the border. If we look now towards the north-south dimension, in this quarter, 74% of respondents report that they have had meetings with partner organisations in the other jurisdiction on the island of Ireland. And for 46% of respondents, their level of contact has been at the same level as the last quarter and has increased for 30% of respondents. So there is still quite robust levels of contact interaction north-south. 76% of respondents who have had meetings reported that the meetings with their partner organisations discuss challenges to cross-border cooperation, either on occasion for 51% or to a significant extent for 24%. The nature of these challenges, as ever, are varied and manifold and include different statutory policies, lack of data sets, the impact of Brexit, and the challenging political and societal issues we have at present associated with the protocol. 80% of respondents to this round of the survey are currently involved in cross-border collaborations with a partner organisation in the other jurisdiction on the island, with the main areas of collaboration being in cross-border cooperation, community development, education, and economic development. And 26 respondents are actively considering new collaborative projects. Of the 47% of respondents who are currently engaged in cross-border collaboration, they reported that they were in receipt of funding for their collaborative projects, and the predominant source of funding for those projects is either the Irish government or the EU. And if we turn now to perceptions of the contextual environments for cooperation and collaboration, 54% of respondents have reported that the political context for cross-border cooperation has stayed more or less the same since the previous quarter. And that's with 36% saying it's deteriorated and only 5% reporting an improvement in the political context. When we've asked people to expand through the qualitative and open field texts on their experiences of the impact of Brexit and the protocol on the political context, respondents generally pointed towards politicking having a negative impact on the conditions for collaboration and inhibiting scope for cooperation. We can see in the quotes here that it's a frustrating gameplay for party political gain for the most part. And the politicisation of Brexit and the implementation of the protocol and TCA have exacerbated community relations and are undermining relations between the UK, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. This is creating, in some ways, a more difficult environment for cooperation. However, some respondents did report an increase in cooperation engagement from political parties. One said the majority of political parties seem open to collaboration, however, that often doesn't reach media headlines, which skews public perception. And another has said it feels like there's been an improvement in PR messaging from political parties and partners on joint working, commonality around victims, and movement on the protocol. Piece 4 and the establishment of small all-island funds has created more visibility to the common social, economic and cultural issues for society. I would like to see more on democracy and how citizens of civil society are included in the changes and reform processes. Now, turning towards the social context, 30% of respondents say that the social context has deteriorated on the previous quarter, and only 5% say it's improved, with the majority at 61% saying it's remained the same. Respondents have indicated that the social context is still fragile following Brexit, and this is having impacts on cross-border movement and knock-on implications on the conditions for collaboration. We see that social context remains fragile, requiring support from grassroots organisations, which should then have the opportunity to feed into the development of appropriate policies for our communities. And perceptions about the actors in the other jurisdictions have, fairly or unfairly, deteriorated in some communities we work in. When looking at the regulatory context, 51% of respondents say that the regulatory context has remained the same on the last quarter, and 36% saying it's deteriorated. Worth noting here that no respondent at all reported an improvement in the regulatory conditions over the last quarter. When we asked respondents to expand on their experiences, respondents primarily reported to uncertainty and issues in labour mobility. And this has become quite a predominant theme throughout this survey. Concerns around recruitment and worker mobility is something that is going to bear close monitor moving forward, particularly for EEA nationals, given the introduction of frontier worker permits. We can see some of the quotes from the participants. New UK immigration rules affecting capacity to accept interns from EU other than Ireland, so EEA countries generally. Concerns about delivering Meals on Wheels to vulnerable older service users in Northern Ireland from the Republic of Ireland. And the uncertainty of the regulatory context. It has not deteriorated, nor has it remained the same, but the context has become much more uncertain. And this is something that bears emphasising. Uncertainty has been a constant throughout the surveys, so all through rounds of the survey, there's been lots of mention of uncertainty, and it's often that people don't know whether things have gotten better or worse, and this is because there's a lack of information and a lack of clarity. People know that things have changed, but they simply do not know what has changed or how, and so they don't know how to respond. And so moving forward, certainty and stability is certainly required, but this requires improved information and communication in terms of what people are having to do or what they need to do moving forward. Looking to the material context now, 46% of respondents believe it is the same as the previous quarter, with 28% reporting that it has deteriorated on the last quarter, and only 12% of respondents say it's improved. When we've asked respondents to elaborate on their experiences, they've mentioned issues around supply chains east-west, but have noticed improvements generally due to businesses becoming familiar with the new trade processes with new paperwork, and also some reorientation to north-south trade. And obviously this reorientation has informed a lot of the UK government's response to the protocol and Lord Frost's Lisbon speech. We see our transport and form filling has improved with experience and knowledge, and businesses finding new sources of goods. Shops have more access to produce in the Republic of Ireland, but I'm not sure how that is working out for everyone. And slower, more costly, and without reciprocal end-to-end buy-in to ensure receiving goods is seemingly for the Northern Irish-based receiver of goods. If we now look towards the east-west dimension, this quarter, almost half of respondents, and 49% of respondents, have reported having meetings with partner organisations in Great Britain. And for 72% of respondents, this is at the same level of contact as the last quarter, and 16% reported that the level of contact has increased on the previous quarter. So again, the same with the north-south dimension, we are seeing quite robust levels of contact, which is promising, and that these levels are improving, at least for some people. Suggests that people are still very keen to maintain these relationships and are working hard to do that, which is very, very encouraging. 60% of respondents reported that meetings with partners in Great Britain discussed challenges to cooperation on occasion for 43%, and to a significant extent for 17%. Particularly the obstacles or challenges involving stakeholders from making policies and programmes that work for different parts of the UK and Ireland because of their different legislative, political and social contexts. 61% of respondents say that they are currently involved in collaboration with a GB-based partner, and the predominant areas of collaboration are economic development and community development. And 44% of respondents are actively considering new collaborative projects with GB-based organisations. And 35% of respondents who are presently engaged in East-West collaborative projects have reported that their organisation is in receipt of funding for those projects. And that's being drawn primarily from the UK government, charitable foundations, and from the organisation's own core funding. Looking now towards the contextual environment, you can see that in the political context, 48% of respondents say that the political context has remained the same on the previous quarter, with 39% saying it's deteriorated and only 5% noting an improvement in the context. When we have asked respondents to expand on these experiences, they've indicated a lack of trust in the British government and a lack of progress in politicians being able to address issues. You can see in the quotes here, the challenges of Brexit and the protocol remain, and the political rhetoric continues to be stoked up. GB does not seem to have answers for mitigating Brexit for NI. Good Friday Agreement is at risk if Stormont is pulled down. Looking at the East-West social context, 61% of respondents report that the social context has remained the same on the previous quarter, and 21% says deteriorated, and only 3% have marked an improvement. And again, this is becoming quite a common theme throughout the surveys, that anxieties among Protestant Unionist and Loyalist communities are kind of being exacerbated among social relations. And some protests against Northern Irish Protocol still happening, although seems with small numbers. The Good Friday Agreement again at risk if Stormont is pulled down. Looking to the regulatory context, 44% of respondents say that the regulatory context has deteriorated over the last quarter, 38% say it has remained the same, and only 2% have reported an improvement. And respondents have generally reported to unilateral actions by the British government and misinformation around the protocol is having a negative impact in terms of East-West cooperation. Again, we can see in the quotes, inaccurate claims about the implementation of the protocol is stifling normal trade relationships. Unilateral actions around the protocol on the part of the UK government are undermining confidence and trust. And I think it's becoming more difficult as the political will from Westminster is not there. As the impact of Brexit is being felt more now, this may change.
I think Ben is frozen there for a second. I'll give him 2 seconds to come back. Otherwise, I will take over from this point.
You say on the last quarter, 36% says deteriorated and only 3% say it's improved. When asked to develop on these experiences, respondents have generally pointed towards not being able to access and purchase supplies. So due to VAT implications, we are less inclined to purchase supplies from GB, and especially among Great Britain stores, there seems to be less products in these stores, with some stores cutting these lines from their Irish stores. Also, shopping online, the charge to return products to some stores, depending on the delivery service used. One thing that has been noticed as a positive through this is the news that telecom companies were taking steps to avoid roaming charges being applied in the border region. And one of the respondents has said, the decisions by some of the big mobile telecoms providers not to bring in charges for inadvertent roaming between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland is welcomed and aids cross-border communities and workers who are a very, very small share of the revenues basis for these multinationals. And this is an area where progress is to be welcomed and should be encouraged. Industries taking decisions to make small steps within their competence that ameliorate cross-border challenges is something that very much should be encouraged and progressed. Looking towards the protocol, we asked respondents on essentially their knowledge of the protocol and where they got their information from. Now, 69% reported that they do not feel there is enough information on the protocol, or enough information available, compared to 15% who thought that there was. However, 16% of respondents feel that they are very informed on the protocol, and 61% feel somewhat informed. And the press and social media are one of the primary sources of information. And 67% of respondents gathered information on the protocol from press and social media. The Irish government was a source of information on the protocol for 65% of respondents, and the EU for 55%, while the UK government was a source of information for 43% of respondents. In addition to the open text questions that are asked specifically around these contextual factors, we also asked respondents to provide, in their own words, any additional comments and insights that they feel would be beneficial in helping people to understand the impact of Brexit on the protocol on cross-border contact and collaboration, both north-south and east-west. And generally, these responses are calling for a shift in tone from politicians and greater leadership from governments. And in the quotes here, we can see that the upper level lead must be more visionary rather than small though necessary developers locally, just calling for higher level leadership. Unless we challenge the deliberately negative narrative from the UK and the DUP, we will end up not resolving the solvable issues on trade and creating a worse situation on trade and everything else. And the ordinary people on the street would get on well together if they were not stirred up by mindless and bigoted politicians on both sides of the political divide. So there's a clear message here that political rhetoric and a lack of leadership is having negative impacts and inhibiting cross-border cooperation, both north-south and east-west, and this is coming from across the political divide. So in summary, then, this round of the survey indicates that overall, the context of conditions for cooperation between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland and between Northern Ireland and Great Britain this quarter are broadly the same or worse as the last quarter. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, the composition of the panel means that we cannot draw direct comparisons between this and previous rounds of the survey. However, by drawing on the high number of respondents who have participated in at least one previous round of the survey, combined with the qualitative responses we've been getting, we can begin to see evidence that indicates a normalization of the deteriorated conditions as organizations begin to operate within the new context. And so this normalization is essentially occurring at a lower level than pre-Brexit, or specifically pre the end of the transition period. So as a result, substantial improvement really is required in order for the conditions for North-South and East-West cooperation and collaboration to return to this formal equilibrium. So while people are adjusting and while they are getting used to the new normal as it stands, we still have some way to go to return to the level that we were at pre-Brexit. Now, the common theme through this survey has been the increased obstacles to labour mobility and recruitment following Brexit, as people find it difficult to recruit from across the border, and in the case of Northern Ireland, from the EEA, given the introduction of frontier workers permits, the rollouts of settled status and the points-based immigration system, and this is something we are likely to see more of moving forward. But despite these challenges, cross-border cooperation, both north-south and east-west, remain relatively robust, with a majority of respondents reporting engaging in meetings in collaboration with partners in the north-south dimension, though this is slightly less for the east-west dimension. They're still quite healthy and I believe getting healthier over the course of the year. Ultimately, stability and certainty is very much needed for cross-border cooperation and collaboration. And this requires all parties, particularly at governmental level, to come together to agree on the workings of the protocol and to actively help and support cross-border organizations, both north-south and east-west, in adapting to and working to improve the conditions for cooperation and collaboration in and across these islands. And I think I'm going to leave it there because we're approaching half an now. If anybody has any questions, I am happy to answer them, and as is Anthony. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Ben. And yes, as Ben mentioned, if you have any questions, comments, insights, just put them into either the Q&A or function or into the chat function, and exchange information between yourselves as well in the chat function. But please do put your questions in. But as you cogitate, perhaps, although bearing in mind it's getting to 10:30, and we like to keep these briefings relatively light in terms of your expenditure of time on these. There's a couple of things that I would just like to really stress again from what Ben was saying there, and that last point, when we undertook the first quarterly survey, that is where we saw the responses really stressing a deterioration of the conditions, particularly the political conditions for North-South and East-West cooperation. So we started at that, let's say, that very negative place. And then for quarters 2 and 3, we kind of seen responses indicating that they have stayed, the conditions have stayed more or less the same, a fair proportion indicating that they stayed more or less the same, but more or less the same. The general trend is more or less the same, as in from that bad place that we were in the first quarter. And even in quarters 2 and 3, we've also seen respondents indicating that they have worsened further, particularly in terms of the political conditions. But the other thing I'd like to stress, And I think it was when Ben was talking about the East-West dimension, and he noted it there again towards the end. It is, we acknowledge and we can see how organisations, civic society organisations on the island of Ireland and local authorities are still, despite that kind of worsening of conditions, despite the complicated context in which we're operating, community organisations are still expending the energy, having the commitment to continue cooperating with other organisations in the other jurisdiction on the island of Ireland, or with counterparts in Great Britain. So there's still that willingness, still that desire, still that commitment to cooperation and to maintaining relations, which is awe-inspiring. And from us, from the Centre for Cross-Border Studies, I just have to commend all of those who are still engaged in that cooperation and maintaining those relations despite the challenges.
Yeah, very much so. The will is definitely still there and increasing. I think what's required is support from governmental levels and clarity.
Excellent. Look, there's a question here from Aidan. He's asking if there is a breakdown of survey respondents by sector, i.e. community, voluntary sector, public sector, private sector, as he's interested in feedback on labour mobility and recruitment issues. So basically, what types of people are responding to the survey?
There is not, I'm afraid, Aidan. However, there are some other reports that will be out towards the end of the year that do touch on this through some other organisations. So we don't pick up on a sector breakdown here. But towards the end of the year, there will be at least one, I think, 2 reports coming out that do start to pick up on those dimensions. Yeah,
and just Aidan, just so you know that we do capture within the survey respondents of anonymity is absolutely preserved. I have to stress that, but respondents do indicate which organisations they are responding on behalf. So we do know what the organisations, which are the local authorities that are responding, and just so you know, I'm going to actually put it into the chat in a moment. As with the previous 2 surveys, there is a research briefing that is published that has a lot more detail, which you can then consult at your leisure. So I'm going to put that into the chat at the moment. But yes, we do know who is responding, what the nature of the organisations and local authorities that are responding to the survey, where they come from. Ben did show whether they were based in Northern Ireland or the Republic of Ireland, or whether they were all island organisations. So yes, Aidan, we do have that information, and we will be perhaps publishing that in the research briefing for the 4th quarter, which is going to be an interesting, I suspect, survey, because that will capture some of the events that weren't captured. Respondents couldn't respond, for example, bearing in mind what Lord Frost said in his Lisbon speech, or they couldn't reflect or respond bearing in mind that the European Commission's recent proposals around implementation of the protocol. I can see another question coming in from Stephen. Is there any information about communities that naturally span the border and the impact of Brexit, etc., on them? Ben, do you want to take that one? Or
there is information around. I'm not sure if there's anything that's specifically framed in that way. But if you look for things like Katie Hayward's series of report from, I think, 2017, and there's one that's being released, I think, possibly today, actually, certainly soon, but this year's iteration is out. And they look at the impact of Brexit on border communities. So stuff through the Irish Central Border Area Network does. We got anything else?
No, Ben, that's an important report that or series of reports that you highlighted in terms of communities, and especially communities in the border region. The work that Katie Hayward has been doing with ICBAN, which looks at individuals. So I just to step back here, just to remind you that the survey that we undertake is for organisations and local authorities, community organisations and local authorities, so not individual citizens, although Katie has been looking at individual citizens. The other thing that I would note is that a flagship Border People project that really is provides information to advisors and others who would be in direct contact and advising citizens who have cross-border lives, whether it's cross-border working, cross-border pensions, cross-border social security, cross-border retirement, cross-border living. Border People is our flagship project in that sense. And we do get a lot of feedback from people in terms of issues that are arising, questions that they have, complications that they have. The thing that I would stress here that is that we're in a context now, post-transition, where people aren't even sure of what, so they encounter an issue, but is that issue arising because of Brexit? Is it arising because of the protocol? Or is it arising from something completely different that has nothing to do with it? So, for example, just to give you a very, let's just say, specific example in terms of how things that are introduced may complicate cross-border living is the £100, the voucher that people in Northern Ireland are getting at the moment in terms of COVID and having to support local businesses. You know, some people who are cross-border citizens have been raising questions as whether around their eligibility for that. Stuff to do with people with their driver's licenses and wanting to operate, let's say, taxis in the other jurisdiction. So issues that are arising that might not necessarily be directly related to Brexit or the protocol, they're just issues of everyday cross-border living. So just to go back to the initial question, this survey is around aimed at organisations and local authorities rather than individual citizens, but we do have information coming from Border People, and obviously Katie Hayward, for example, is capturing some of that in terms of impacts on cross-border communities.
I'm just going to come back briefly to Aidan's question from a moment ago. Aidan, in the Q&A, I'm just posting an answer for the EURES cross-border report from last year, which will address some of your questions on labour mobility and recruitment issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to give you a heads up, that is an annual survey. So the third annual survey undertaken, published by EURES, is going to be coming out shortly, and that does really give you a clear indication.
Kieran, I will just post that in the chat so everybody has access to it.
Yeah, that it really does draw out issues around cross-border labour mobility. Keep your questions coming in. I would ask Ben to hum a tune for a couple of minutes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paste, hopefully, into chat. No, I didn't. I'm going to paste into the chat the briefing report that comes along with this. So bear with me for 2 seconds. Here we go. This is all very dramatic. There we go. So in the chat now, you have a link which is to the research briefing that accompanies this presentation of the results of the third quarterly survey. I'm just seeing if there's anybody else. And there, Joe, thank you. Joe in chat there. Joe, who is the cross-border partnership coordinator. He is the person who's behind the publication of that particular report on issues. Well, it's not issues. It's looking at cross-border labour mobility, the status of that, what's happening in that particular front. So just contact him if you would like to have any further information on that.
It's a very useful report.
Yes, very useful with lots of statistics for those of you who like statistics. I'm just going to give people a moment if anybody else has any other comments, questions. I'll give you another couple of seconds. But as we wait, and maybe there's nothing coming through, but I would just like to really end by stressing again how grateful, I mean, we really, really are grateful to all of those who are responding to these quarterly surveys. It does take some time to respond to them. I'm not inordinate, I'm not talking hours. I'm talking, over the length of a large cup of coffee, you'll be able to respond to the survey. But they're absolutely right. The responses that we get really, they do inform our interactions then with decision makers, with those who are responsible for the implementation of the protocol, and communicating to them whether the necessary conditions for North-South cooperation are being maintained, but we're also communicating around issues arising from East-West cooperation, so between the island of Ireland and Great Britain, and East-West relations, because all those sets of relations are absolutely vital as elements or as the embodiment of the three strands of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which must be safeguarded and whose health must remain at optimum levels. So as I think we've reached at the end of our time, really, I'd just like to thank Ben in particular for presenting the analysis. Really grateful to Ben for being with us here again today, and really grateful to you for joining us here today. And please stay in touch with us, and we will look forward, if not before, seeing you whenever we do the presentation of the survey results for the fourth quarter. So thank you very much to everybody, and have a great morning and have a great weekend. It's Friday. Bye bye.